Hello again, and welcome back to Educator.com's Advanced PHP with MySQL course. In today's lesson, we're going to be continuing development of our web application, and we're going to be incorporating what we learned in our last lesson about cookies to improve the functionality of our site's shopping cart. We're actually going to introduce a couple of small topics before we get into the actual changes we made to the web application. We're going to be talking about a new operator called instance of operator. And then we're also going to be talking about how to access properties of objects that are properties of other objects. And we'll see a little more about what that looks like on the slide coming up. Then we're going to go through two different versions of the web application. In version 11.0, basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating basically a shopping cart object. It's going to be called a cart object. It's going to be called a cart. That's the name of the class. And we're going to use that to sort of represent our shopping cart. Right now we've sort of been using an associative array that we've been passing around that has called items, that has keys that are the item ID of the item in the shopping cart, and then its value is the quantity. Well, we're going to change that and put it into an object. In 11.1, what we're going to do is we're actually going to implement a shopping cart that uses cookies. So in 11.0, we're going to sort of convert things over to an object model for a shopping cart. In 11.1, we're going to use that object model with cookies to get a more functional shopping cart. So PHP provides what's called the instance of operator. And basically what it allows you to do is determine whether a variable is an instance of a specific class type. So for example, if we have a variable called object or obj, and we wanted to test to see if it's, for example, a instance of the item class that we use in our web application. The way you would do that is instance of is a binary operator. You put the variable that you're testing the type of on the left-hand side, and then you put the exact name of the class on the right-hand side of the operator, and this becomes a Boolean expression. So what it does is it says if object is an instance of the item class, return true. If it's not, return false. So is item would be true if object is an item, and it would be false if it isn't. This is useful for when you're accepting parameters from functions and so forth to test to make sure that you're getting appropriate objects that you might be working on. For example, if you need an item object to work on, you need to be sure that you're past an item object as opposed to an integer, for example. And again, you need to make sure that you use the exact name of the class to the right of the operator. And it's just the name of the class. There's no $sign or anything like that. Also, we know that an object has properties. And the data types of an object properties can be any data type, which includes other objects. So for example, we could have a cart class, and we could define a variable item, for example, that is intended to be a variable that represents an item object. So basically what we have is an object within an object. So how do we access the properties of the item object that's a part of the cart object? Well, we use an arrow operator in sort of a cascaded syntax. So basically, let's say, for example, we have a cart class, like the one above, that has a property named item, as it does up here, which is an item object. That's the data type of that property. And so let's assume that the item object is the item that we use in our web application. So the item object we know has a price property. So how do we access the price property? Let's say we have an instance of the cart class. So we've created an instance of cart called cart. Let's not worry about the details behind it, but it's been set up. An item's been added to it. So item has been set to a new item object, for example, maybe in the constructor of the cart. And we want to access the price of this particular item object. Well, the way you do that is use multiple arrow operators. So for example, we get the instance of our cart object, and then we use the arrow operator to say, give me the item property. And what that's going to do is return the item object, the instance of the item object that this current instance of the cart item property is set to. And then, now that this is an object, we can again call the arrow operator on it to say, now I want the price property of this object. In this case, this is an item object that was taken from the cart. object, and so this is saying how to get the price from it. And you can sort of do this indefinitely. You can have objects within objects within objects. So this is a way, and we're going to see that in the reason I'm introducing it now, as well as the instance of operators, because these are some things that are getting introduced into the versions of the web application we're going over in today's lesson. So let's say price was even, and maybe price was an object, and maybe it had a property that was called currency that lets you know the currency it was in. And we could access it like so, and that sort of goes on down the line. This also works with class properties that are actually arrays of objects. So for example, let's say in our cart, instead of just having an item object, we had an associative array of item objects, where the key to that array is an item ID, and then the values are item objects. So what you can do is you can say, for this cart instance, get me the item object that is in the items associative array associated with the key item 1001. So this is going to return an item object, and then because it's an object, we can use the arrow operator on it to get the price of it. And so this is going to say, give me the price of this item object. So this basically is saying, get me the price of item 1001 that's in this particular cart instance. And this would be assuming that it has an item 1001 and so forth. But that just demonstrates how you can also access object properties that are arrays of objects. So now we're going to sort of get into the nuts and bolts of the changes we're making in this web application. Basically, we're introducing two new objects into our web application, cart and one called cart item. And basically what they are is they're classes that are created to model a shopping cart. That's what we do with object-oriented programming. We sort of model real-world objects. So basically, we have a cart class. So we have this cart class, and as in the last slide, an example, it's actually going to contain a property called cart items. And this cart items is going to be an associative array of cart item objects. So we actually have another object that we're creating called cart item. And what this does is this represents an item that's in a cart. So it's going to have, we've set it up so that it has two properties. One is called item, and one is called quantity. So for example, in our shopping cart, when we add an item to a shopping cart, we add the item, and then we also have a quantity associated with it. So we're going to encapsulate that into one object called, it's a cart item object. It's going to contain an item object, which is the store item that this cart item represents, and then it's also going to have an integer property, quantity, that's going to represent what quantity of that item is currently in the shopping cart. Now in our shopping cart, this is an associative array. It's going to have keys that are item IDs for items in the shopping cart, and what they're going to point to is cart item objects. Which, as mentioned over here, contain an item and a quantity. So basically we have this cart object that contains an array, associative array, of a number of cart items. And a cart item is basically an object that encapsulates a store item along with its associated quantity. What we can do then is we're also going to be creating a method for our cart item class called calc item total. What that's going to allow us to do is, because this cart item class knows what item it represents and it knows the quantity, it has access to the price of the item. It also has access to the quantity of the item, so we can calculate the cost due to this particular item in the cart, and that it would be the price of the item times whatever quantity it sent. So what we can do in our cart method, or our cart class, is we're actually going to create a method called calc total. And what that's going to do is it's going to basically loop over, when we need to calculate the total of a shopping cart, it's going to loop over all of the cart item objects within its cart items array, and it's going to call the calc item total on each of those items. So instead of having to manually go and look up the item and get its price and then multiply it times the quantity, it's going to have the cart item object do it for us via this calc item total method. So this is going to loop over all of the different cart item objects within the cart. It's going to add up their totals, multiply it times the sales tax rate, and then generate the total, and so the total for the entire cart. So basically, each cart item generates a total due to that item, and then the cart basically takes all of those cart item objects together, adds them up, and then calculates sales tax. So we're actually going to be replacing our former method that was just a user-defined function called calc cart total. And that functionality is going to be moved into this cart class as well as this cart item class. So let's go and take a look at what these classes look like. Look at version 11.0. Well, first let's look at the cart item. Our cart item class, if we look at the source code, it has two properties, item and quantity. Quantity is an integer representing the amount of this particular item in the cart. Item is an item object that represents the actual store item that this cart item represents. So basically, this object is basically an item and its associated quantity. We have a constructor that just takes an item object and an integer for the quantity and basically just sets those private properties. And then here's our calc item total method that we had talked about. And basically what that does is that returns the total due to this particular item in a particular shopping cart. So for example, it multiplies the item price times its quantity. Well, it gets the quantity from from this cart item's variable quantity. So it says this and then gets the quantity. Now to get the price of an item is contained within the item object. So what we need to do is we use the this variable to say, give me the item property of this particular instance of a cart item, and what that's going to do is give you the item object of this item property that was set in our constructor. And then using this cascaded arrow syntax that we talked about before, it's going to say, from that item object that this cart item represents, give me the price of that. It's going to multiply the two together, and it's going to return that. If we go and look at our cart class, it has a number of different methods in it. It has a constructor that allows you to basically pass it, as we'll see, it allows you to basically pass it a bunch of items, not cart items, but item objects, and it'll add them to its cart items property. So if we let's look at the actual source code, we can see that it has one property called cart items, as we had discussed, and it's an associative array of cart item objects, and the keys to that array are the item IDs. Now this cart class has a number of different methods that have been created. It has an add item method, which allows you to add an item to a particular cart. It allows you to get basically access to that cart items property, which basically give you an associative array of all of the cart item objects contained in this particular shopping cart. It has a method called inCart that allows you to test whether a particular item is currently in the cart based on item ID. It allows you to test whether the cart is currently empty or not, meaning that there's no items in the cart. And then it also allows you to remove an item from the cart by specifying the item ID of the item you want to remove from the cart. And then here, our calc total method, if we look at the code for it, we can see that basically what it does is it basically gets the associative array property in this class, cart items, which is an array of all those cart item objects. It loops over each of those items, and then basically it cumulatively adds to the subtotal the total due to each item. So for each cart item object it loops over, it calls the calc item total method, adds it to the subtotal. Once it's done looping over all the items, it adds the sales text to it, rounds it, and then returns that method. And that's going to be used by, for example, our checkout script to be able to get the calculate the total of a particular of a cart. One thing to note is that if we actually look at the add item function, what it actually takes is it takes not a cart item object, but it takes an item object. So for example, when we go to add an item on our script, let's say we're actually going to be adding a button to our item.php page. It's going to allow you to add an item to the cart. When you click on that item, it's going to go to viewcart.php, and it's going to actually load an item object from the database for the item that you selected based on the item ID, and then it's actually going to be calling this add item method on a shopping cart object, and it's going to pass it this item object. Well, what's going to happen is basically this method is going to test if the item's in the cart. If it's not in the cart, it's going to create a new cart item object that wraps that particular item object, and it's going to set its quantity equal to 1. If it's already in the cart, basically what it does is it goes in and gets the quantity of the current quantity of that item in the cart. And in this case, you can see here we're using the syntax again, the cascading arrow syntax. And here what we're doing is saying, from this particular cart object, give me the cart item's property, which is an array. Give me the cart item object that's associated with the item ID that we've passed into this, that is for this item we're trying to add, and then get me the quantity of it. And then what we're going to do is basically re-add the item to the cart items array, but increasing the quantity by 1. And then so that's how we add the item to the cart. So what we've actually done in our web application is reduce the size of this a little bit. In version 10.1, which is our last version of the web application, when we go to View Cart, basically what it does is it simply outputs all of the items in a particular store. And that's not typically how a shopping cart works. Typically, you have an empty shopping cart, and as you add items to it, it builds it up. Because we haven't had the functionality to be able to do that, our current version, or our last version of it, just lists all of the different items, then you enter the quantity you want, and then you go to checkout. And there it's going to say we need to add something. In our new version, what we've done is on each item page, we've actually added a button here called Add to Cart. And if we look at our old version, there's no button. And what that does is now when we click on Add to Cart, it's going to go to the, not sure why the lines aren't showing up. There they go. It's going to actually go to the View Cart page, and it's only going to add that item to our shopping cart. So now our View Cart page actually only has items that are in the particular shopping cart. The way that we, so what we've done is we've modified our View Cart script. So now View Cart, instead of just being a, basically, in a way, a static script that just goes through and lists all of the, in our old version, just lists all the different items in our particular cart, what we're going to do is we're going to allow it to, we're going to pass to it an action. And we can set the action to be add item, and then we specify the item ID of the item we want to add to the cart. And then so we're going to look at View Cart in a second, and that's going to we're going to see how we process that into adding an item to a cart. We also can remove an item from the cart, and that's a feature that we've added to this page. We've added this remove link. And what you can do, and what that does is now we can also process, our View Cart page can also process a remove item action, and you basically specify the item ID of the item that you want to remove. So for example, let's go look at viewcart.php. Previously in 10.1, basically all we did was we looped over, we got all of the items in the store using this getItems user-defined function, and then basically just output a row in the table for each item in the store. Now in our ViewCart class, what we've done is we've actually, we allow it to take an action now and an item ID, and the item ID is going to be the item that we want to add or remove from the cart. And then in our data processing section, and this is just temporarily for this version of the app, and we're going to update it later in this lesson to use cookies. We're going to temporarily create a cart object, or we're going to create a cart object, and then what we're going to do is we're going to, if the action of the script is to add an item, we're going to load the item object from the database based on the item ID, and we're going to add it to the cart. If it's remove the item, we're going to use the remove item, the remove item function that we created in our cart object to remove the item from the cart. Then we've changed the output of our cart page. Before, we would just output rows basically for each item that's in the store. Now what we've done is because we have this isEmpty method, we first of all test if the cart's empty. If it's empty, we just output a message that says your cart is empty, the script is done. If not, what we do is we output that table again, but this time we loop over all of the items that are currently in the cart, currently in that cart object. So now instead of just looping over all of the items in the store, we're only looping over all of the items that are in the cart. So when we add an item to a cart, cart is going to be populated with an item. When we call get cart items on that object, we're going to get the associative array that contains all of those cart item objects. And then basically what we're going to do is we're going to extract information from that cart item object to output each item that we have in our shopping cart. It's going to output the item's name, a link to the item's page, its price, and its quantity. And then also we've added this new link down here, which is a link to viewcart.php that has a query string that says remove item, and it basically provides the item ID of the item we want to remove. And so what that's going to do is it's going to do that for each item in our particular cart. The thing that you'll notice is that in our new version, if we add baseball bat to the cart, well, if we go and look at our view cart script at the very beginning, we're going to see that it's going to create a new cart object. It's going to add the item to the cart, and then when it goes down to the processing section, it's going to be able to loop over that one cart item and output a link for it. So as you can see, it's output here. Now, however, if we go ahead and click View Cart again, and this time just go to View Cart without any action, or without any action that says Add Item, it's going to say the cart's empty. And basically what's happened is we lost the state of our shopping cart, and that's what we're going to learn that cookies are going to provide for us. They're going to allow us, in between viewing different pages of our website, to maintain the state of that shopping cart, to say, hey, this item is in the cart and it has a quantity 1. The reason is that when we go to View Cart without any add item add item action, when we go up here, it's going to create a new cart object, but it's going to have no item to add to it, so our cart's going to be empty. So when it goes down here, it's going to say cart is empty, and it's going to output your shopping cart is empty. So basically, we have no way right now of showing that when we go from view cart to to viewing the cart over and over again, we have no way for those different HTTP requests to maintain the state of the cart, and we're going to use that using cookies. The other thing that you'll notice as a result of that is, let's say we add a basketball to our cart. So now we have a basketball in our shopping cart. Now let's say that we want to go and add a DVD player. When we add a DVD player to our cart, we can see that the basketball is no longer in there. Again, that's because we have no way of maintaining state between the different requests. Each time we go to this view cart page, it doesn't have any prior knowledge about the basketball that we've added. All it knows about is the item that was currently added to the cart. In this case, it added item 1005. And we're going to see how to fix that in our new application with the use of cookies. And so as mentioned, you can see that we've added the Add to Cart buttons to our item page, and we've added remove links to remove items from the cart. One other thing is that we've also updated our checkout.php. Previously in checkout.php, we passed, basically what we would do is we would pass an items array via post form. So for example, when we would submit this form on our old application, it would post, let's show an example. It would post data to checkout.php, and if we actually look at the post data, we can see that it provides, it has this items array that has the key, which is the item ID, and then the quantity associated with each item. So for example, this shopping cart contains item 1001, 1002, and 1003, contains quantity 1, and so that's how we're able to calculate our shopping cart total. So basically what we're doing is we're passing the information along in this array. Well, in our new version, we don't have that form anymore to submit. All we have is this add to cart button. And what that does is that passes information to the view cart page using the action and item ID. And so what that does is our view cart page now only has one item. So when we go to checkout, and as you're going to see, I'll explain in a second why that doesn't work. What's going to happen is we're not submitting all that information anymore. We're not submitting this items associative array that contains all of the items in the store along with their quantities. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to change checkout so that it's going to be able to use a cart object. So what's going to happen now, what's eventually going to happen is we're going to have a cookie that is going to contain all of our shopping cart information. So when we click checkout on our view cart form, it's going to go to the checkout page. Checkout.php is going to be able to read the cookie, build up a cart object, and then be able to process the order. For example, send out an email that says, okay, this is the order that was emailed. So we don't have that functionality with the cookie set up right now, so what we're temporarily doing is we have no way of passing the information from our view cart form to our checkout.php, because in our new version, viewcart.php is no longer a form. It's just a link to checkout that says action equals checkout. So what we do is, just so we have something to show for this checkout form, is we create a fake cart. We're just basically creating a cart object, and we're adding 2 items to it. And then what we're doing is we just check to make sure that the cart's not empty, which is not going to be because we've added stuff to it. We calculate the cart total using the calc total method. And then we process things as before. We process if the action is to complete the order. We validate the customer data, and then we go ahead and we email the order basically to the site administrator. One thing to note is that, well, among many things to note, is that one is previously we validated the cart by using this isValidCart function that was in our util library. We're not going to use that anymore, because now we have this isEmpty function that's built into our cart object that will automatically tell us whether the cart's empty or not. We're not going to be using calc_cart_total because that functionality is now built into our cart object. And then in addition, as we saw in our email order function in our last version, we provided it this cart items associative array, which is that array that has the keys as the items IDs and the values as the quantity of each item. We pass it the order total that was calculated by the calc_cart_total function up here. We pass it the array of customer information, and then we also have to pass it information about all the items in the database, because email order needs to extract the price information from the items. For example, it needs to basically just the item information, so we have to pass all of that. Well, in our new call to email order, we accidentally pass it 2 information. We still pass it the customer data that was submitted on the customer form, but we also now just provide one other variable called cart, which is this cart object that we've created up here at the beginning of the form. Now, because cart object contains cart item objects that has their quantity, and then also it has the actual item object embedded within it, that email order function has all the information it needs within that cart object to be able to extract the price of each item and to generate its email order, the order for the particular email. So if we look at our email order function, we can see that now it takes a it takes a cart object that contains all of the contents of the shopping cart, and then it still takes a customer object that contains all of the customer data. And we can see that what it does here is now it loops over each of the items that are contained in the cart. It extracts the price information and then the quantity information, and then basically outputs a line in our email. Whereas in our previous version of this, there was a lot more involved in our email order function. Basically what we had to do was we had to loop over each item each item ID in our associative array, get the quantity for it. Then what we'd have to do is the quantity was greater than 0. Basically what we would do would be we would look to see if that item ID, basically we look up the item ID, the item from the parameter get items, or all items that was passed, which is a listing of all the items in the store, extract the price information that way, and then generate this line that shows the item ID and its price. Now we extract all that information rather than from this all items array that contains information about all items in the cart. Now we simply do that by accessing the information that's in the cart method. And so we've used the email order function. The other thing is that in our checkout.php script previously, when we checkout.php sort of has 2 sections to it. It receives information from previously received information from viewcart.php, and that information would contain all of the item IDs and their quantities for items in the shopping cart. And then what it would do is it would allow a user to enter its shipping information, and then it would proceed to a process order, a complete order section. So it has sort of two actions that it would process. Well, in order to be able to access all of that cart information that was passed from viewCart.php to checkout.php the first time, what we had to do at the bottom of our form for the customer information was we actually had to loop over all of the items in the cart and create hidden input fields that basically would create that items array that specifies the item ID and the item quantity. Well, we don't need to do that anymore, because what we're going to be doing in the next version is we're going to be using cookies to contain all of that information. So we've actually eliminated that from our checkout.php. We've also eliminated passing along the order total between the different actions of our checkout.php form, because now each time checkout.php is loaded, it has access to the cart object, which can calculate the total each time, so we don't need to pass that along. So when we look at checkout.php at our form, we don't have any of that information here at the bottom. So now we're going to get to the point where we use cookies. Basically what we're doing is we're going to use cookies to allow us to maintain state between adding different items to the shopping cart, and also to be able to pass that information from viewCart.php to checkout. We've created a function, a user-defined function in our util library called buildCart from cookies, and basically what that does is it's going to when you go to the checkout form, for example, checkout.php, it's going to look at the cookie that the user sends, it's going to see all of the information in that cookie, and then it's going to build up a cart object from that cookie. The cookies that get sent or they get set when you add an item to the cart are simply going to be name-value pairs, where the name is the item ID and the value is the quantity. So for example, these would be two cookies, one cookie called 1001 that has a quantity equal to 1, one cookie called 1002 that has a quantity 2. This build cart from cookies method would be able to read both of these cookies and then build a cart object up that says, okay, this cart is going to contain the item 1001 with a quantity 1 and the item 1002 with quantity 2. So then when you go to checkout.php, it can pass that information along, and then when you enter your shipping information on checkout.php, instead of having to forward all of that information basically hidden at the bottom of the form, that cookie is going to get passed along when you go to the complete order action of checkout.php. Because it does that sort of implicitly, you don't have to pass that information along. Checkout.php will have access to that cookie and can then get access to all of the cart information. So let's go take a look at what the last version of the store looks like. So now we have, let's add an item to a cart. So now we've added a DVD player to a cart. And let's say we want to add another item to the cart. We want to add a basketball. Now when we add item to the cart, we can actually, it actually maintains state. The reason is that if we look at our new viewCart.php page, basically what it does is it checks to see if there's a cookie, if there's any cookie data. If it is, it builds a cart up from that cookie. If there's not, it checks to see if the action of the form was add item. If the action of the form was add item and the cart is empty, then what it does is it sets a cookie for that new item. It basically sets a cookie that says, okay, item 1001 has a quantity 1. So then now the cookie contains information that there's item 1001 of quantity 1 within the shopping cart. When we go to a different page and add another item to the store, this cookie that we previously said here is going to get sent back to viewCart.php. So when it builds this cart up from cookies again, it's going to know about that previously added item. And so what it can do is then it will maintain that state, and so it will contain information about the previously added cart. The other thing it can do is if the item is already in the cart, and for example basketball, and we want to add another one to the cart, we click add to cart again, we can see the quantity is updated to 2. The way that works is that basically if the item is already in the cart, and viewCart.php will know that because it's built up the cart object from all the cookies that were passed to it. It can check if the item's in the cart. If it is, it gets its current quantity, and then it resets the cookie for that item ID, incrementing the quantity by 1. The same thing works for remove item, except that it simply sets the time for this particular item ID cookie to a time in the past, so that removes the item removes that item cookie, and so the next time you go to viewCart.php, that cookie is not going to get passed along because it no longer exists. One thing to note is that on each of these pages, after we update or after we set the cookie, that cookie does not become immediately available to the form, so that because what we've done is we've built our item up from the cookie that was passed to the form originally, which if we have no items in the cart is going to be an empty, there's going to be no cookie data. So when we go ahead and we set the cookie, it doesn't know about that cookie until you refresh the page, so we have a header function that refreshes the viewCart.php, which is going to allow it to show the updated shopping cart. And that's why when we go here, we can see that we've had an updated quantity. Here we can click on Remove Item. What that's going to do, and actually, if you look down here at our Firebug console, we can see that when we loaded this form, it actually set a cookie for our basketball, item 1006, and you can see it set its quantity equal to 2. You can also see that previously when we went to this page, it knew it passed the web browser passed along information about the current shopping cart in the form of a cookie where it said item 1005 cookie is equal to 1, item 1006 cookie is equal to 1. So that's how it knew that there was already 1 in there. So what's going to happen is when you go to this page, you've added a second basketball, for example, it's going to set the 1006 cookie to equal to 2. When we refresh the page, you can actually see here, Firebug lets you see the actual refresh happening. We can see that when the page is refreshed, you can see that the new cookies has been sent, so it has item 1005 equals 1 and item 1006 equals 2. And so that way when it refreshes, it's able to show quantity 2 for the basketball and quantity 1 for the DVD player. Now when we remove this, what we can see in our original request is we can see that we've set a cookie 1005 and we've set it to expire in the past, so the cookie is going to be deleted. So when the page refreshes, we can see that the only cookie it has is for item 1006, which is our basketball, and that's why it doesn't show up again. Now what we've also done is on this page we have a checkout button that just simply goes to checkout.php with action checkout. And what that does is, because this is in the same domain, it passes that cookie that contains all the information about the cart along. So checkout.php now is able to build that cart up from the cookie that it has. It's able to test if the cart's not empty. If it's not empty, it can calculate its total. If it's completing the order, then it goes ahead and it processes the customer information, and it goes ahead and emails out the order. And then also what it does is, after it is done completing the order, it goes ahead and deletes all the different cookies by setting their values to a time in the past. So after we check out, if I just put in some fake data here, go to complete order, we're going to say that the order was successfully completed, but now when we go back to view our cart, it's going to say it's empty because there's no more, all the cookies have been deleted that have that shopping cart data. The other thing to note is that when we have the action is equal to checkout, we're simply outputting the current total, and then we output that shipping table. And again, you'll notice at the bottom here that it doesn't contain the information to forward all of the items along to checkout.php with the complete order action, and that's because all that information is contained in the cookie. So that ends today's lesson. Thank you for watching Educator.com, and look forward to seeing you next time.